Hi, I'm Joy Ting from the Virginia Winemakers Research Exchange, and I'm here with Harvest Tips for Winemakers. Tip number 4, measure YAN to guide your nutrient additions. Healthy, happy yeast perform steady, complete fermentations, make delicious aromas from grape precursors without producing off aromas. When provided with adequate sugar, nitrogen, vitamins, and lack of stress in their environment, yeast can work magical transformations, turning juice into wine. But sometimes these components are not all available in ample amounts in the grapes. Nitrogen is a common deficiency, but it can be adjusted by the winemaker. Nitrogen is needed by yeast for many different functions in the cells. When fermentation first starts, yeast are dividing rapidly, and nitrogen is used to make many components of the new cells. Lots of nitrogen is used up in this first portion of fermentation, which is why most nutrient addition strategies recommend a first addition of nitrogen within a few Brix depletion. It's important to wait until fermentation has started, though, to make sure that you're feeding Saccharomyces and not other microbes that may have come in on the grapes. Even when they've stopped dividing, the yeast cells still need to replace the proteins that have been damaged and make new proteins to adapt to the changing cellular environment. It's important to remember that once the alcohol gets too high, cell membranes can no longer import nitrogen into the cell. They have to survive on what they have stored. The second addition of nitrogen, after 1/3 of the sugar is used up, should give the yeast enough to keep going through the rest of the fermentation. It's important not to add nitrogen too late, since any leftover nitrogen that has not been taken up by the cell will remain in the wine, potentially feeding spoilage organisms or causing negative flavors. Some grapes have all of the nitrogen they need to feed the yeast through a complete fermentation, but some don't, which is why the general recommendation is to measure YAN. YAN measures the forms of nitrogen in the juice that the yeast can actually take up through their cell membranes and put to use. Usually, there are two components to the YAN measurement: the inorganic ammonia portion and the organic fraction that includes amino acids and peptides. These two types don't contribute the same amount of nitrogen per milligram. So if you are calculating YAN from these two components, make sure to use the formula shown here. How much YAN do you need? Well, that depends. The baseline in the literature seems to be around 140 milligrams of nitrogen per liter, but there are a lot of caveats. Some yeast strains are less efficient and therefore need more nitrogen. More stressful fermentations, like higher Brix and higher temperatures, also increase the demand for YAN. Aeration tends to decrease the cell's need for nitrogen, and the availability of micronutrients and vitamins may also alter YAN targets. Research from the Australian Wine Research Institute shows that these targets may also be different for whites versus reds, and depending on the goals of the fermentation. Even if you have enough nitrogen to complete the fermentation, it's important to remember that amino acids also provide building blocks for aroma compounds. So you may need higher levels of YAN to ensure good fruit expression. If you don't have enough nitrogen, fermentations may be slow or even stop prematurely. If the yeast are stressed by low nitrogen, they can produce off aromas such as acetic acid and hydrogen sulfide. If you have too much, however, fermentation may be too fast or too hot. The amount of YAN in juice depends on many different factors. Vineyard soils and management practices seem to produce consistent trends, such that some vineyards produce high YAN fruit, while others produce low YAN fruit. But there are also vintage variations. Be aware that hot, dry vintages, like we are seeing in 2023, tend to have lower YAN. The only way to know for sure is to measure this value for yourself or send it out to the lab. Samples for analysis should always be taken right before yeast are added, so after cold settling for whites and after any cold soak for the reds. When sending a sample to the lab, it's important that the juice does not start to ferment during shipping, so make sure to prepare it appropriately. More information on Yan and other harvest topics can be found at the WRE website.